Welcome to After Credits here on the Intercut podcast channel, where we review a new movie, including everything that comes after the credits. I am your co host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, he doesn't have work, he has plans. It's Arturo Zurita. I'm reusing your intro.
It's a great intro. One of my most anticipated movies of the year. I've been excited to watch it. Now that it's here, I'm excited to watch it again. Uh, yeah, it delivered on what I was expecting. Even more so because it was the directorial debut of Michael B. Jordan.
Absolutely. Michael B. Jordan getting back in the ring, and this time in the director's chair as well for Creed 3, which follows the continuing journey of Adonis Creed. After winning his final match, he retires from boxing to be closer to his wife Bianca and their daughter Amara. He also runs a boxing academy alongside his coach Little Duke. But when Dame, a figure from his past, returns, Adonis finds himself in the fight of his life. Arturo, after three Creed movies now, do you feel like this franchise still packs a punch?
Look, I don't think anything's going to beat the first Creed. Personally, that has been my favorite of this new bunch that they've been able to make. But if I were to rank them, in my opinion, it still goes Creed 1, then Creed 3, surprisingly topping 2 easily. And then the second one, which, if you don't know, they're looking to make as a spin off, as we'll get into. But I don't know what your ranking is.
I would go with the
Same?
same ranking as yours, although doesn't that kind of put it in line with the Rocky tradition in that like a not as stellar one is followed by a more stellar one?
Hey, why I'm a big Rocky 2 fan. That's my movie over there in the franchise. So I'm not
Right,
opposed
right.
to a sequel overshining the original, but it has been a solid franchise so far, and they've even started working on four, or at least some ideas to four, with Michael B coming back to direct. So
Very
I'm
cool.
very happy with what he was able to do here. So much that I actually think it wasn't long enough.
Yeah, I mean, at 2 hours, I was wondering how long it would feel. You mentioned when we talked about this on Weekend Must Watch that it's actually the shortest of the Creed movies,
Right? That's crazy.
but it's one of the fastest 2 hour movies that I've seen. I don't know. It's just if it's just the anticipation of the next climactic fight sequence, or if it's just that like they kind of go through like almost a spark notes of some scenes. But this movie really, really moves. I think there are some moments where they could have like settled into the rhythms a little bit more and give us more time.
For
I
sure.
mentioned before, I feel like it could have been a half an hour longer. There's like a whole arc between Creed and his mother that just sort of jumps to the end rather than
Too
going through the
fast.
beats of it. But yeah,
Hmm.
it is one of those things though that like yeah, maybe feels fast, but it also doesn't drag. It's not something where you're
Yeah.
going to be like checking your watch ready to go home.
And for a first time director, I think they chose that route of it being quicker than leaving it, leaving too much to hang out there. But if you watch the trailers, there are a lot of shots, not just from extended sequences, but what seems like completely different scenes, places that he visited that I'd be very curious to see when I don't know, maybe get a director's cut. Rocky 4 just got a director's cut. I don't know how many years later, so I'm sure Creed 3 could get one.
Absolutely. So Michael B. Jordan, he's as we mentioned, directs this one. He's discussed being heavily influenced by anime for the fight scenes,
Yeah.
and there's an interesting interview going around where he mentions specifically how Naruto really impacted the choreography of that final fight against Jonathan Majors. What did you think of his sort of hyper stylized approach to the fights, and did it work for you? Because it is a bit of a departure for the Rocky franchise.
A little bit. I'm twofold with that because I think that to say that Rocky the series hasn't already taken these interesting turns is like belittling it. I've heard a lot of people talk about, oh, this time they have an antagonist that really lives up to something, and it sounds to me a lot like elevated horror. I don't like that phrase because
Mm,
it's saying that everything before it isn't as great. I understand the phrasing of it, and I understand the compliments given to this movie, but Rocky's already kind of had that. What he's able to do here is take an even more visual approach, I want to say, into the themes and metaphors that are
Yeah.
applied to the ring. Right, a lot of the times in the previous Rocky movies, it's the discussion that's happening before the match. You are fighting yourself. You know, you're going into this
Hmm.
with not the challenger being the opponent, but you being the opponent. I love what they did with the ending here, which we're going to get into full spoilers later.
Yeah.
But his use of anime was beautiful. Did you notice the posters in his room? He had the
Yeah.
Naruto. He had,
Uh-huh.
I think he had a Dragon Ball Z one. I
Yes.
tried looking for it, and there's a clip out there, and they literally they broke it out. They blurred out all the images. But I thought it was a really cool way for him to sneak some stuff in there, and there were some punches that I knew from my childhood from some animes that
Yeah.
delivered completely. So shout out to
Yeah,
him
I
for that.
mean, it's not like you said as if previous Rocky films haven't had these moments of visual flair and don't haven't done exciting fight sequences. And I think particularly in the first Creed, how Coogler is really able to put you in the ring and kind of give you the
Mm,
visceral feel. Like I love some of the shots where you see punches actually connect and just how hard they feel. But what he's
and they
doing
connected
and
too.
what Jordan is doing here is something completely different because he's not trying to give you the like over the shoulder or this is how it would feel like to be in a boxing match. He's giving you something almost like mythological and fantastical, and the
Yeah.
way in which like the crowds will disappear and they'll be in an arena, a fog lit arena. Like that's just that's kind of like straight out of straight out of anime for one, but also just straight out of a much less grounded film than this one. And to combine the sort of grounded street level story, the kind of ordinary guy trying to pursue his dream element of it, with this really like visually dynamic, visually like experimental and different approach, I thought was really cool and just a brave choice to make in this kind of blockbuster filmmaking. It goes from feeling kind of gritty and real to suddenly feeling like a Wachowski's movie, and that's, to me, that's a huge compliment.
Yeah, I love the flair that he brought to it. I think it made it very interesting. And it also added a lot to the characters because I like when a fight sequence isn't just me versus the other guy. It's a lot of internal
Absolutely.
battles that they're fighting to the point that it reminded me of another movie. I'm sure you've seen it and you love the movie Warrior. One of the
I'm
best,
glad you
I would
brought that up.
consider, fight movies out there. Like, to me, this is the epitome of what this movie was going for. But of course, I'm going to
Yes.
love a movie that aimed to be something like this over a sock and bop and fight. This is the peak to me. And seeing those sequences towards that final fight of these two characters who very much see each other like brothers, dude, I was into it, and that's why I'm saying if you could just let those moments breathe a little bit more before
Yeah.
the fights, because there's a moment, the moment these two are going up against each other, we don't see them talk, we don't see a weigh-in, we don't see a press conference. Their only communication in this cut of the movie is through a Stephen A. Smith clip. So there are definitely little scenes
My
that,
theater
if
was
put back into the movie,
cracking
would be
up
dope.
when Stephen A. Smith
Stephen
was
A.
on
Smith
screen.
playing Stephen A. Smith. Hey,
Although I was
dude, I
wondering,
rewatch. What's
it,
up?
it didn't look like the actual first take set. Why did they film it on the real
Of
first
course
take
not.
set?
Hey, do you remember what the first Creed did? They filmed on the actual part of the interruption set, and I thought that was dope. And
Right.
they did a much better
Yeah.
job than Stephen A. Smith trying to play himself. But again, I just think with a little bit more build-up, with not having the worry of a first-time director getting it over 2 hours, I don't know, man.
Absolutely.
We would be talking even with more hype for this movie than I
Yeah.
already am. But
Maybe
yeah, I'm
something a
glad
little
you also
more
saw the Warrior
special.
cut in there for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure, Warrior, especially when you get to that ending, which maybe we can dive into a little bit more fully in a moment. But I do think what you talk about alludes to my next point in that while the action in the ring is super compelling, albeit maybe a bit abridged, there is in that final fight, like I felt like it went from round 2 to round 11 in the blink of an eye. I mean, it kind of literally
Bro.
did, but I wish there was a little bit more rise and fall and rise again in some of those fights, and they extended them. Um,
Hmm.
but while all that in ring action is very very compelling, I did feel like it lacked some of that outside of the ring. It felt a little bit more boilerplate when it's asking Creed to work on balancing his commitment to his family with the guilt he feels over his past. Uh, some of that stuff resolves really nicely. But did you
Hmm.
also feel like that was just a little bit more like template movie? in those moments?
In full spoiler territory?
We can get into it if you're ready to.
Full spoiler territory 100%. I've never seen a wrap up this clean since Mean Girls when everyone decided to be friends. I don't know what happened there. There was so much animosity that's happening in this film towards the beginning where you have an antagonist in um, the character of Dame coming in very subtle, just wanting to see if the person who he helped become the boxer who he is today can help him as well. And there's a
Right.
sequence early on, bro, where you kind of match cut from the flashback when they were young, where Dame gives him like a stash of money. Flash forward to the present when Dame's out of jail, looking for his buddy to see what he has for him, and he
Right.
gives him the same stash of money. Come on now, that to me was well. I'm like, that's where the turning point is. And there's a beautiful moment
Yeah.
halfway through where you realize this almost Joker-like plan that Dame's character has in mind, and he really does switch on a dime. There's that scene at the
Yeah.
beach where he just completely takes over, and you realize what he's kind of been orchestrating. And I was engaged, bro. I was completely into it. Then you get to that final fight, and as awesome as it is, 12 rounds, you're right. They felt like three.
Yeah.
You just didn't feel it. I'm again arguing that it has to do with the trimming because you go back to Creed 1. Creed 1's fight is edited and choreographed to perfection. The rise and falls in your heartbeat. It is one of the best fight scenes put to film. This one gets the advantage of being very metaphorical and
Yeah.
interesting in that aspect, like you said. When it zooms out on
More
the crowd, I
representational.
thought that was awesome. When it becomes the what's it called, the prison bars. There was one sequence where they're talking about the mattresses, where they were, there's a deeper story in here. A lot of issues were happening when they were young, and he talks
Yeah.
about the mattress having bed bugs, and then he gets hit, and the corner becomes the mattress. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
you are dealing in that anime psychological level, and I absolutely loved that. Sacrifice
Loved
a little
all
bit of
that.
the action, but it was still really cool to see the state of mind of the fighters
Hmm.
a little bit more. But yeah, it
I
just left
wonder
me wanting
also
more.
if Michael B. Jordan, given that he's been the actor asked to, carry those physical fight scenes in these previous Creed films, if he's bringing some of that knowledge into it too. He's like, this is sort of what I go through in my head as an actor, and now I get to
Yeah,
literalize it. Now that I'm behind,
could be.
now I'm directing the film.
All right. Leading into that,
Yeah,
I don't know if you have your training montages on deck, ready to be ranked, but that J. Cole beat was fire. Dre beat,
yeah.
sorry. Um, J. Cole on the training montage was so sick. I felt it should have gotten longer because you have two people who Dame's character is up there with Mr. T. He's up there with Rocky Three's character of someone
I was
who's
gonna
way
ask
bigger than the
you,
actual star.
how do you compare him to Rocky antagonist? Like, does he live up to what you have come to expect
Oh,
from this franchise?
he's one of the greatest Rocky Creed antagonists of all time.
Yeah.
This is a regular camera. There's no gloss on here.
Right.
I should have written down on the whiteboard. He should have lost this. Ant-Man should have died this year, and Creed should have lost. It's as simple as that. I don't. Yeah.
Hmm.
To me, that's one part of the movie that, as much as I enjoy it and I like it, I didn't see him standing a chance here. And my biggest critique is that I don't know if Michael B was able to put himself in the story to center himself as the villain that he really was. Because I don't think I'm the only one who went into this movie listening and paying attention to what really felt like Michael B. Jordan, Adonis Creed being the villain of this movie. A lot of people want to call him the antagonist, but I see the story of a man who made it to the top and has turned his back on
Hmm.
someone who helped him to get there. That's my take on the movie.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I like about it is that it is a little bit more messy in its message of who's good, who's right, who deserves to win this. And obviously, it's going to give you, again, we're in full spoilers. It's going to give you kind of like a Hollywood satisfying ending for the hero of our story. But I like that it's a bit messier, and that
Lame.
ultimately, I I like that ultimately the thing that he has to, that the actual sign of success for him, the feeling of like achieving something, doesn't come in winning the fight. It comes in sitting down with him and getting and apologizing and getting
Yeah.
onto the level with him. And yeah, maybe it would have been a bit more effective had these scenes have more room to breathe, had they given the actors their due, given that they're such great actors. But I did like that the arc was not ultimately resolved in the ring. I thought that was kind of a brave choice for one of these movies to make, which is
It's
like,
beautiful.
again,
Again,
kind of brings us back to the idea of Warrior, in that like they're resolving outer ring
yes.
outer ring conflicts in the ring.
To recap it, they're able to do a very slick, sly, if you want to use that word, way of going back to the first movie and finding a moment where after he was picked up by his mom, young Adonis, he was sneaking out with his friend who he knew from the homes, that being Dame's character of
Yeah.
Jonathan Majors. But they give you this backstory of how they were treated really badly. They were almost like forced to fight in these homes by this character of Leon, and that led to an incident when they were young where Adonis tried to fight him, and in Major's character protecting him, he went to jail.
Right.
So yeah, that ending when he realizes that the real fight is forgiving himself. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I was fighting my own tears back, but like I just wanted it to breathe a little bit more. So again, if
I
you
hear
leave me
you.
wanting more, that's a great thing for your movie. But I'm still left wanting a little bit more. I do have a question for you. The way
Shoot.
that they expand Donnie and his family now, what do you think about that?
That again also felt a little bit like standard kind of like, this is the third movie in a franchise now, right? Like we're seeing this with the Marvel movies too, that now that we've been with these characters for a couple films, they all have children and they all have home lives and they all are underwritten. And you know, they try to add a little bit of texture by uh having him communicate in ASL with his daughter. But I don't know, I feel like whereas the Dame stuff feels loaded with all of this history that the actors are able to bring to it, and maybe like a little bit more unique of a dynamic. I don't know if I vibed as much with the family. Like, yeah, it's I get I thought it was interesting in that he's balancing different commitments. But I thought when they were actually like talking about his home life, aside from showing off that amazing mansion, like literally one of the best mansions I've ever seen in a movie,
Crazy,
I
yeah.
thought that was the least interesting stuff in the film. Especially when,
I
as we mentioned
yeah.
earlier, the stuff with his mother felt so rushed ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also don't like that. I think it's very obvious and clear. My brother was the first thing that he said. They're clearly going to make the daughter the next stop. I've heard him
Mm-hmm.
in interviews. Very much seems like they want to make the daughter the next stop, and that's something that's kind of been sprinkled in throughout Creed early on. When he in the first one when he fights, there's little kids in the gym as well, and he kind of observes them.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that emphasis was put on this one. But I'm so glad you brought up the MCU thing because in the sacrifice for the time they should have given him, Zach, did you know about the Drago spinoff?
I did not know they were doing a Drago spinoff. I thought it was cool
Yeah,
that they brought him back in a not major
I
role
thought
for
it
this
was
one.
pointless because all I saw there was an MCU little. Hey, gotta mention this person to bring up the next spinoff.
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone has talked about this. There's a much bigger discussion to be had there about the behind the scenes of Sylvester Stallone writing, directing Rockies, and not owning a single piece of it. He is upset with this. And I personally knew about this, so every time I saw him appear on screen, it felt like an MCU tie-in moment. That
I hear
hurt. I
that.
didn't like that. I
Yeah,
felt
I mean,
like
I didn't
the
even.
bits with the daughter were to set her up for the future. Zach, there is a prequel for Rocky in the works. They're looking for a young Rocky. Everyone's eating out of Rocky's plate at this point in time, dude.
Mhm.
I don't know what to tell you. Maybe that takes a little bit away from the movie. I don't know. At the same time, we are on Creed 3, a spin off sequel. So I
Right.
can't really
It's
complain
the
about some spin off sequels.
exactly. It's
It's weird,
already
man.
the ninth film in the overall Rocky
Yeah.
series, not just the third film in the Creed franchise. So it is part of this whole IP franchising game. And yeah, maybe it's just that I didn't know that some of those movies were in the works, that I didn't mind that they brought back a character from the previous films. It felt like, especially since we are in the third of these films, like more of the lived in world of those
Mm-hmm.
films. didn't bother me in the moment, but yeah, I guess I don't love the need to franchise everything, and I don't know if they. I wonder how many times they'll have to recast the kid if they're going by Ant-Man standards. Speaking of
For
Ant-Man,
sure.
let's get back to Jonathan Majors, because I thought Majors,
Yes,
you
sir.
said he's really great here. I think he just does so much to elevate this film. I think every time he's on screen, he's not just waiting for the other actors to finish their lines. Like his whole body language says a lot about his character and his disposition and his sort of like confrontational nature. And just it's really interesting to just even watch the way he holds himself. That there's that one moment when he and Creed get into it on the beach and just giving him a little wave and saying aloha, that feels like a Jonathan Majors ad lib. I would not be surprised to find that out. I think to
It's
me,
deeper. His
you want to
last
get
name
into
was
it?
changed to be his stepfather's last name.
Oh, in the film.
That's how deep it got. Jonathan
Mm.
Majors listens to music on set. He didn't realize because he doesn't watch playback. All of the Nipsey Hussle and East Coast influences he was listening to on set ended up becoming his walkout music. Ooh. So when you say that it's an ad lib from him, it goes even deeper than that, man.
Yeah.
He's one of the
For
best.
me,
He's one of the best.
eh, for me, and we've seen him on screen 3 times this year now. I actually think
And in
this is the
person.
best I've seen Jonathan Majors in this year. I got it above Magazine Dreams and definitely above Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumanium, but I know you're really into that Magazine Dreams performance. I just thought he's
If y'all
incredible here. Stole the
y'all gotta
show.
realize how they set it up this way. Get that Marvel check, get that Creed check, and then when this comes out in the fall, it's all done for y'all. Yeah, I
Yeah,
still
it's
think
the
this is his best
Oscars.
one, and he has said this is the best performance he has ever gotten his headspace into, and he thinks that this character is like the epitome of what he's been able to do. In fact, he
It
claims
is
the MCU and the Creed stuff is just to highlight this for when it comes out.
I mean, it is really interesting to watch these movies as close together as we've had the chance to, because, it
Yeah,
does feel like the performances are speaking to each other in a way. When you see him do the
good
incredible
point.
workouts in Creed, you know that, like, it's nothing compared to the things he's putting his body through in Magazine Dreams.
Those
I don't know, but
shakes.
I think maybe I liked him stealing scenes in a supporting role more than I ultimately liked the weight of that character, and the unevenness that I felt from Magazine Dreams. But I know you also liked that movie more than I did.
Yes,
Although
sir.
we'll get into Magazine Dreams more about when more people can see it. Circling back to Creed 3, we also talked about this being Sly Stallone's franchise. This is the first
Yes,
of
sir.
any film in the Rocky series to not feature its creator, Sylvester Stallone. What do you feel like that? How do you feel like that affected the film? Was it missing anything not having Sly there?
Does that guy have thoughts? Sylvester Stallone has his Rocky series, and while he doesn't need to be here because I understand it's the Creed franchise, right? I get it.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing his own thing. What if I were to tell you that he's a third of the freaking Creed franchise? When you're watching the Rocky movies, Mickey ain't getting just booted to the side.
Right.
Imagine if the Creed series decided to take the character of Duke. Why? Duke would remain in there. You wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
just switch him out. Like you're not gonna take out Stitch either. You took out the coach who trained Rocky, who trained Creed. Creed is now in his biggest fight, and no one's gonna go and ask, "Hey, what does Rocky think about this?" They did archives of the previous movies and just precision, cut him out of certain frames that he was in the background to. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's ridiculous. I understand the reason for wanting to make it its own. They have completely. This is because of behind the scenes issues. They have completely forgotten that he isn't just a side character or the spin-off that led into this. He is an integral part to the Creed story as a supporting character. And I thought it was really goofy for them to take it. In no other franchise would it have been okay for him to just disappear after being a pivotal part in 2 movies. Zach, he had an Oscar nomination for the first. It
Yeah.
makes no sense. You
I
feel
mean,
you feel differently because it makes no sense.
I
I'm
feel
okay with
less
it though.
strongly. I feel less strongly than you do, and I think creatively, I don't know if the movie suffers like significantly. They end up just sort of letting Wood Harris assume the wise elder role, but
And that's fine.
spiritually, it is missing something. Spiritually, there is something off about Michael B. Jordan finally getting to assume the director's chair. in the way that Sylvester Stallone has directed so many of the Rocky movies before him,
Yeah.
and not having that figure there, it does sort of feel weird, especially when there is that moment when Creed's character does bring up Rocky. They mentions that
Right?
that Apollo gave Rocky a chance in his first fight. It's like, yeah, where's Rocky? Right? We're gonna,
Exactly. That made no sense to me. It's like you're evoking it, but deciding to not pay attention to him, and it clearly relies on behind the scenes issues. I
yeah,
watched Rocky 3 going into this. My dude, bar for bar, a great adaptation of Rocky 3, but it's
mm,
still the same story, reaching the top and not knowing what to do when a real hungry person is coming into the ring and wants to call you out for your imposter syndrome. It's all there. So yeah, I'm okay with Sly staying with it because I think he's an integral part to the story, and I personally think he should have died a couple of a couple of movies ago.
yeah.
But this would have been the one because in Creed 3,
They even had
sorry,
a death
Rocky
arc in
3, there
this
was a
one.
major death. Yeah, they swapped out what
Yeah,
would have been Creed's death with Mama Creed instead. But look, I like what they were able to do with it. That shows you how much I really appreciate the movie, even if I do think he is
yeah.
a huge supporting role to it. But he said he's down to come back for Creed 4. I know the Sly fans have been really like, they came out of Creed 3 having a good time, but they want to respect Sly. He said he'd come back for a fourth, and I would love to see him come back for a fourth.
He's probably going
But
to
he was
get a
missing.
chance to, because Creed 3
Yes,
absolutely
sir.
dominated at the box office this
So
weekend.
happy.
Uh, it is not, with $58 million just domestically, it is not only the biggest opening weekend ever for a Rocky movie, but for any sports film, generating over $100 million globally. Art, given that it's doing so well financially, we're going to get more movies, but does Rocky have the
Series.
legs to do more?
Yes. My man, Rocky can go the distance. We're still here. We will continue to be here. I just hope they continue to have the same care that they've been able to with these last three. Even with two, with Creed 2, which I don't love, they've still been able to take care of this franchise to make it something bigger that's lasted since the 70s. So I'm not doubting on Rock.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible that in just its opening weekend, it, it already made more money than Rocky 2, Rocky Balboa, yeah, I mean, I
The
think it's
IMAX
great
numbers.
that it, yeah, I mean, that too. And I also, I wouldn't discount Jonathan Majors either, starring in the second highest grossing film of the weekend. Like, he's turning into a bona fide movie star.
That guy.
Um, I don't know, man. It's also like, when you have a film, because the first film and the second film revolved around uh non-black antagonists. I wonder if also this being like the blackest of the Rocky movies yet,
That's
it
true.
spurred a lot of the audience to come in. We've seen, when you do give an often overlooked audience something to come out to the films for, they can really represent. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting because I think the boxing movie is just inherently dramatic. I think, unlike a lot of other franchises, you can always kind of find room for more drama in the story of a boxer, in the story of a man putting his physical specimen on the line in pursuit of the dream. So I'm fine to get back in the ring with Creed or with Rocky, or even maybe with Drago if they find the right people to involve in that film. It,
For
it,
sure.
it to me, it's more about who they choose to tell these stories. And while at one point I wasn't sure if I'd want Michael B. Jordan to be the guy at the helm, he's completely proven to himself to me with this film. So I'd be happy to see him direct Creed 4 as well.
Agreed. 100%. I will be there. Opening night.
Awesome. So I think that's about all for our thoughts on Creed 3. We both are in favor of it. We think it's worth heading out to the movie theaters to catch, especially if you can see that big IMAX screen.
Yes,
Anything
sir.
else you want to add to Creed 3 before we wrap this up?
Just like I said in the weekend must watch, don't go watch this in 40x because you will be the loser of the match.
Absolutely. So that's all for this edition of After Credits here on the Intercut Podcast channel. Catch more from me, Zach Shevich, by following me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at ZShevich. That's ZSHEV as in Vitaly Klitschko, ICH. And check out my YouTube or TikTok channels at Multiplex Show, where you can catch my tips on what to make for your Oscars party this year. Art, where can people find more from you?
You can find me over at LME Explain on Twitter, on YouTube, on Letterboxd, or every week here on the Intercut Podcast.
You can listen to every episode of the Intercut Podcast on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcatcher is. I like Overcast. And then make sure you subscribe not just to the audio feed, but to the video feed as well on youtube.com/intercutpod, where you can watch our bright smiling faces as we break down the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of the Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming every Monday on our YouTube channel. And please leave us a comment, like the videos. Consider heading over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. And shout out to our listeners in Kenya for putting us on the TV and film podcast charts
Hey,
out there. Like our
shout out.
Facebook, follow our Instagram, follow our Twitter, support us on Patreon. You can find all of those pages at Intercut Pod, where you can get updates throughout the week from Art, from me, from all the guests that we feature here on Intercut. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, let go of whatever was and walk into what is.